Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, there's no turning back as Sudan approaches the first anniversary of a brutal civil war that has killed at least 15,000 and hopes for a return to democracy. Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan addresses the nation saying that the country has entered a new era. Also, Senegal's new leaders sparked hope for big change and impactful progress, but the stark lack of women given key posts in his new government has drawn criticism from dozens of local organisations. We hear from our correspondent on the ground. And it's been a good month for some of the restaurateurs in Tunisia who have cashed in on the nighttime conviviality that the Muslim faithful have enjoyed upon breaking their daily fast during Ramadan. But first, as the one-year anniversary of the war in Sudan approaches, the UN's warned that the rate at which the conflict is forcing people to flee the country is still picking up. More than 8.5 million people have been displaced. Almost 2 million have become refugees. At least 15,000 have been killed, all since a violent power grab erupted between the military and the RSF paramilitary force last April. Those hoping for peace and a return to democracy have been further disturbed this week by a speech by the head of the army, basically saying that the Sudanese have to get used to military rule. General Burhan said that the war marks a new era for Sudan and rules out any sharing of power with civilians. Our regional correspondent in Nairobi talks us through.
There is no turning back. No return to what existed before April 15th, 2023, October 25th, 2021, or April 2019.
To understand why the civil society is worried by this speech, you have to understand two of the three dates that he mentioned during his address to the nation. First, October 2021. It's a reference to the military coup that he led against the civilian transitional government led by Hamdallah Hamdok. At that time, this government was supposed to organize the country's transition to democracy. And then April 2019. It's a reference to the peaceful revolution that ended the 30 years long rule of Omar al-Bashir. At that time, hundreds of thousands of people were demonstrating in the streets of Khartoum asking for full democracy in Sudan. So what can we understand from Burhan's speech? That it's over now. During his speech, he says that he's trying to protect the motherland, that he's trying to prevent mercenaries from fighting in Sudan, but he seems to only be protecting his own power. I remember in April 2019, I was in Sudan, I was in Khartoum during the revolution, and some demonstrators were saying that there was no reason for Burhan to give back the power to civilians. The military were in full control of the country. They were controlling many of the government institutions. They were controlling several companies. They were controlling banks. There was no reason for Burhan to give back power to civilians. And this speech seems to be confirming what happened during the past months. Foreign journalists are not allowed to work in Sudan anymore. Local journalists are threatened everywhere. It's impossible for the civil society to work in Sudan. And politicians are even threatened to be arrested if they return to Sudan to try to find solutions to the current crisis. So is Burhan trying to protect the country, or is he trying to protect himself and his own power? Many civilians believe that it's the second option.
The leaders of the UK and Rwanda met at Downing Street in London this week, 2 years after the signing of the first migrant deal between Britain and Kigali. Rwandan President Paul Kagame and British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak say that they hope, despite many delays, that the first flights deporting asylum seekers arriving in the UK to Rwanda could take off in the spring. Clément Roma has more.
Rwandan President Paul Kagame and British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak look forward to flights departing to Rwanda in the spring, according to a statement from London issued after a meeting between the two men this Tuesday regarding their agreement to sending asylum seekers to the land of 1,000 hills. In late 2023, UK judges declared the migrant deal illegal as they deemed Rwanda not safe enough. London then signed a new agreement in December with Kigali to bypass this decision. The new text guarantees that migrants would not be sent back to their home countries after deportation and provides for legal assistance in Kigali. Since December, the Conservative government has been trying to pass a law in the British Parliament to implement the agreement, but debates are still raging. The next session is scheduled for April 15th, 2 years after the plan was first announced by Prime Minister Boris Johnson. According to the UK media, over 500 million euros have already been spent on the scheme. In Rwanda, the Parliament approved the agreement with the UK in late February. Kigali says it is ready to welcome asylum seekers despite delays and contradicts reports in the British press that some of the estates reserved for arrivals have already been sold.
Well, Senegal's new president was swept in on a wave of hope for change. But when it comes to gender parity, Bassirou Diomaye Faye's freshly minted government, formed only last week, has already disappointed many. Out of 32 ministers and secretaries of state, only 4 are women. Now, this imbalance in his administration has not gone unnoticed, as Sam Bradpiece tells us from Dakar.
Many here in Senegal have hailed the new president, Bassirou Diomaye Faye, as someone capable of ushering in a new era of progressive Pan-African politics. But others have pointed out a major flaw. In his new government, led by Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko, a man previously accused of raping someone who he later went on to describe as looking like a chimpanzee that had had a stroke, women are massively underrepresented. In fact, less than 15% of all cabinet roles are currently held by women. On Monday, a collective of 24 civil society organisations and hundreds of public figures issued a statement denouncing this situation. They mentioned an unspeakable underrepresentation of women, which they said would lead to an intolerable loss of vision and intelligence. They say that no country has ever developed with women kept in the margins. To rectify this, they're calling on the new president and the new government to appoint women to lead national agencies and directorates. They point out that Senegal is a signatory to a major African Union declaration calling on heads of state to ensure gender equality at all levels of society. So far, they're very disappointed.
Well, economic sovereignty is another of the big dreams of President Bassirou Diomaye Faye and helped win over so many hopeful young Senegalese to his side during last month's election. Well, on Tuesday, the leader gave his prime minister until the end of the month to come up with an urgent action plan to boost the economy. Currently, the country is heavily reliant on foreign imports and 1 in 3 people live in poverty. Our team reports.
Maktar Diop is encouraged when he thinks about Bassirou Diomaye Faye's programme. The International Finance Corporation, part of the World Bank, invested $500 million in Senegal last year. As its managing director, Diop says he has seen clear signs that the country's new president is open to cooperation.
We are completely confident. We have heard encouraging things. It's extremely important to have a government which has the capacity and the will to develop policies that will get their own country up and running. We are here to do this.
Senegal currently runs a trade deficit of about €6 billion annually, according to data from the country's National Statistical Agency. For some analysts, the country's new leader will have to turn this around in order to transform his sovereignist dream into reality.
France gets much more out of this relationship than Senegal does. It's a similar situation with the United States, Turkey, Russia, and all of the developed economies. This dynamic needs to change. For me, this will be the main challenge for Bassirou Diomaye Faye.
Senegal will begin extracting from large oil and gas reserves later this year, which will help counter its trade deficit. But economists also worry about the national debt, which exceeds that of many other West African Economic and Monetary Union countries.
In our field, we have what we call convergence criteria. Debt shouldn't pass 70%, but we're currently at 80%. It's up to the new government to develop new strategies to resolve this problem.
While President Diomaye Faye will set the broad policy direction, it's the new PM, Ousmane Sonko, who will be charged with putting a plan into effect.
Well, millions of Muslims across Africa will be marking the end of the holy month of Ramadan on Wednesday evening. and welcoming in the festival of Eid. Now, the weeks of Ramadan are partly about sacrifice as believers fast from dawn till dusk. But that does not mean that there's not still good times to be had. Vendors often see a boost to their income as people get together to share meals once night comes. Our team sent us this report from Tunisia.
In Béja, a city in Tunisia's north, the sun is going down and Hamet is preparing a special tradition on the roof of the town hall. He will detonate little bulbs filled with gunpowder to announce the breaking of the daily fast.
Now we're going to put the bulb in the hole like this. It's a big responsibility. Some people wait for the explosion to start eating. Even if there's also the call from the mosque, they need this sound.
This ancient tradition dates back to the Ottoman era when cannons were fired. It has died out in some places, but this teacher says for him, the ritual is still linked to a lifetime of good memories.
For me, it's part of Ramadan, like the smell of fresh bread in the bakeries just before breaking the fast, the smell of spices and omelets. It's a special atmosphere.
And at the exact minute of the fast breaking, the first explosion rings out. As night falls in the capital Tunis, the old city comes alive with free shows. They are organized as part of the Tunis Wishahed Tuna program, supported by the European Union and Tunisian Ministries of Culture and Tourism. In the smaller alleys, pop-up cafes are set up just for the holy month, like Murad's cafe. When it's not Ramadan, he sells sandwiches during the day.
All the businesses get along because there isn't much space. Everyone helps each other. We work together to put out chairs, and everyone makes a little money.
In the early hours before sunrise, crowds flock to Bab al-Khadra, one of the great gates of the old city, to eat the suhoor, a snack before the fasting starts again. Many grab a bowl of dra, an energy-packed, sorghum-based meal.
To me, this is an integral part of Ramadan. I live in Belgium. We don't have this. I came for the holiday to enjoy it.
For most people with pop-up stands, the money they make selling food at night in Ramadan is an additional income. It often particularly comes in handy during the gift-giving and celebrations for the Eid holiday, which follows the end of Ramadan.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks very much for joining us, though, and do so again if you can. Till then, take care.